Morning, everyone. I decided to do some experiment a little bit with sort of a better range of content on this channel, and just for people who may miss the services, I do post them on YouTube later on, like afterwards. Last week, for some reason, I completely forgot to record the service, so I apologize. I apologize for that. I just dropped the ball on it completely. But I kind of wanted to just do a kind of relaxed sort of podcast style content, just kind of going over some of the scriptures that I cover in my sermons over the previous week. Because I think, sometimes things do require more context. Things do require a more discussion. And I mean, if this does well, then maybe I can bring other people on and, to have like a sort of a interview style podcast type of situation going on with this channel, which would be cool. We'll see where it goes. So I kind of want to get through this, just having my morning coffee, very relaxed session. I'm also recording the audio on this so that the audio will be available later on, either on the podcast app, on the Apple Store, or on Spotify. I'm still working on the Spotify thing, so I don't really know when that's going to happen, but I'll try to get through some of that as I go through my day to day. Hopefully, I'll have this podcast available later on today by the time this video is uploaded. It's like, let's see, about 3:41 right now, so in the morning. So I couldn't sleep, so I was like, I'm gonna just get up and check this out and see if I can do this right, and maybe have an interesting topic of discussion for a podcast style video, and some audio for the folks that are just on the go and listening as well. So, like I said, minimally edited video. So I just kind of want to just make this as personable as possible, almost just kind of like I would be having a discussion with somebody sitting in front of me. So last week, I've been reading a lot into Sabbath keeping here lately, and kind of the history of keeping the Sabbath, the history of why is it not kept in most church denominations today? Why do we have a situation where most churches will kind of discredit that commandment as a that most church organizations, most church denominations today, sort of like New Testament Christian believing churches, typically kind of discredit the commandment of Sabbath keeping. And I've heard a lot of different reasons why that is, and a lot of them kind of justify it by saying, well, Jesus died so that we don't have to keep the Sabbath anymore. And a lot of this, and that's just a real simple, cut and dry version of the reason why I think most church denominations do not sort of preach this kind of message where we're talking about keeping the Sabbath holy. And a lot of people attack this from the angle of, I say a lot of people, for those that keep the Sabbath and understand that it's binding, they preach this at a sort of angle of, well, the history from Sabbath to Sunday. Like, how did Sabbath get changed from Saturday to Sunday. And I think they attack it from the point of view that, well, the Sabbath day command is still binding because the Roman Catholic Church changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. And while that is historically accurate, it was that way. To be fair to the Catholic Church, it was that way before the Catholic Church made an edict out of it and a document in at Laodicea, I think in 500 AD. I want to say maybe it was 450 AD, somewhere around there, where they were like, well, we have the authority to do it based upon our, here, I'll actually read it, because it's way more like, when you read it, it's like, okay, that's probably bad. that's probably not, because basically they're saying that they have the authority to change the commandments of God because, they're the Catholic Church, and they have equal rights with God to be able to do what they want. Okay, so here it is. So this was, so 336 AD. Sorry, a little bit later than. So this was at the Council of Laodicea in AD 336, which is the Sabbath day. The Saturday is the Sabbath day. That's the answer. I don't think that's being disputed. I don't think it really ever has been disputed, quite honestly. But the modern age has brought this into, well, every day can be the Sabbath as long as you can just keep whatever day you want and call it the Sabbath, and and that's not biblical either. But so the answer to this is Saturday is the Sabbath day. Okay. Why do we observe Sunday instead of Saturday? Answer: we observe Sunday instead of Saturday because of the Catholic Church in the Council of Laodicea at AD 336 transferred the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday. So they transferred the solemnity, the hallowedness, the fact that it was made holy by God. They transferred it to Sunday, which is kind of, when you read that like that, it's like, oh, okay, so that's what happened. It's a bit pompous and ridiculous to assume that anybody is going to have authority to be able to transfer anything that God has called holy to something else. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Is it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, nobody's got the authority to to change one of God's laws. Like, it's just not, that's just a mess. But it adds to why people are confused about, not just about this subject, but about a great many subjects about the Bible. It's just really kind of crazy to me. But moving on. So why did the Catholic Church substitute Sunday for Saturday? And it says the church substituted Sunday for Saturday because Christ rose from the dead on a Sunday, and the Holy Ghost descended upon the apostles on a Sunday. And this is also another historical lie. Jesus Christ did not rise on a Sunday because the Passover day was just beginning on the day that he died. And they were preparing, the Bible says they were preparing for the high Sabbath. And the high Sabbath is on the 14th day of Abib, which would have been a Wednesday. So 14th day of Abib would be a Wednesday in accordance with the high Sabbath Passover laws. So 14th day of Abib was a Wednesday, long ways away from Friday. We're talking about a whole, 2.5 some odd days off from that. And even so, even if that were the case, let's say he died on a Friday, he would have rose. And if he had died on a Friday and he rose on Sunday, that's not 3 days. It's not 3 days. And the Bible says that when he died, it was getting close to evening. So the night was coming. So and that's when they were going to go and break his legs to get him down off the cross, because they wanted to get him off the cross before the high Sabbath, so that they wouldn't be sort of breaking the high Sabbath commandment. So or the high Sabbath feast, the Passover tradition. So, but they didn't have to, because he was already dead. So even had it been on Friday, let's say it was Friday evening, or it was like 5 or 6 p.m. Friday evening, still rising from the dead on Sunday is only 2 days. So even if he rose at 5 p.m. on Sunday, that's 2 days. So, which it's just not biblical. So if you, this is why it's important to like dig into the stuff that we've been traditionally taught, and really like question this stuff. Because what you find when you start to ask like legit questions about, these biblical topics and discussions is usually far cry from what is being taught in the modern church world today. So anyway, that was just a side note to like the fact. So Jesus' death and resurrection is also another real huge lie that's been passed down generation to generation, which is a topic of discussion on its own right, because there's so much that goes into that. So, but it's definitely worth looking into because it kind of debunks the entire Easter rhetoric. It's like, oh, well, we celebrate Easter because Jesus died and rose again on Easter. Well, no, he didn't. He just didn't. It's a historical fact. He did not rise again on Sunday. If anything, he would have rose again probably right as the Saturday Sabbath was ending. So it would have been sometime Saturday night or Saturday evening. So, or it could have, it was Saturday sometime, maybe in the morning. I don't know. So Saturday sometime. There have been historians that have tried to like pinpoint the actual time of it. So like Friday night, early Saturday morning. Regardless, he was dead for 3 days. So being dead for 3 days would have meant that he would have rose again, probably early Saturday, rather than the Friday death and Sunday 2-day resurrection, like 2 days him being in the grave. So it doesn't really jive with the scriptures. Him dying on the 14th day of Abib makes a whole lot more sense. So yeah, so that really constitutes him being resurrected on probably a Saturday. So by what? And so the next question is, by what authority did the church substitute Sunday for Saturday? And this is another interesting tidbit of historical reference. By what authority did the church constitute, or the church substitute Sunday for Saturday? The church substituted Saturday for Sunday by the plenitude of that divine power which Jesus Christ bestowed upon her. So, what? Like, it's insanity. Like, okay, oh, well, we just changed Saturday Sabbath keeping to Sunday because of our divine power that Jesus Christ has given to us. And this makes a lot of sense when you start to listen to how people justify not keeping the Sabbath. They'll say something similar to this, in that, well, because of Jesus' divine power, because he died and rose again, the old law has passed away and it's no more to be done with, and we're just supposed to be happy and free and lovely. And I've also heard the legalism argument as well on this side of the coin. So, but the simple fact of the matter is that nobody has divine power to change one of God's commandments. Like, that's only something that belongs to God. No one has power to make anything holy. That is only a power that belongs to God. And there is not a single scripture in the Bible that constitutes an abolishment from the Ten Commandments at all. If anything, there's more in the New Testament confirming that the commandments are still binding than there is anything that could be alluded to the fact that Jesus came to abolish the law, which he said that plainly. Like, I think not that I've come to, abolish the law and the prophets. Like, I came to fulfill, and heaven and earth won't pass away before one jot or tittle pass from the law. So nobody has the power to get rid of the law but God. And the law, as in that law of the Ten Commandments, which a lot of people confuse the Ten Commandments with the law of Moses. But the Ten Commandments existed before Moses did. Like, because you go back to Genesis, thou shalt not kill. You got Cain and Abel. Cain kills his brother, and he sinned against his brother. So sin means that there is a law to be broken in the first place to commit a sin. So, and God said, if you don't do well, then sin lieth at the door. So if he hadn't given them laws, then how is there sin? Because, Paul in Romans, which a lot of Christians today love to run to Paul and go to Paul. Well, if there's no law, then there's no sin, right? So, and if that's the case, then what Cain did to Abel was fine. Then it was not a sin. But that's not true. That's not the case at all. But, people don't take the more obvious commandments, or the less actionable commandments, and they say, oh, those are binding. Okay, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not lie or bear false witness. So those are okay. Those are fine. We're good with those. But the ones that actually require you to do something to constitute your faith, no, we can't do that. That's legalism. Yeah, that's nonsense. Which, because if you take the legalistic argument, if you take that logic a step further, then you could say, well, okay, if keeping the Sabbath in this day and age is legalistic, and we're railing against legalism, right? Then so would the rest of the commandments be legalistic, right? So, and another reason why it wasn't kind of spelt out in the New Testament is because it was everybody was Sabbath keepers back then. Like, Paul was a Sabbath keeper, Peter was a Jew, he was a Sabbath keeper. All of Jesus' disciples were Sabbath keepers. Jesus himself was a Jew, he was a Sabbath keeper. And so it was just common out, like everybody kept the Sabbath. So it wasn't like it was commonplace, and it wasn't worth making an obvious point to that. Now Paul makes so many other points about so many other sins because of what he was dealing with in some of the churches that he had set up. He was just dealing with a lot of paganism, a lot of idolatry, a lot of sexual immorality, a lot of lying, a lot of backbiting, a lot of this, and probably a lot of tale-bearing and busybodying. So he dealt with that. That was those were issues that were more topics of concern to discuss with his churches, rather than an obvious topic that everybody already is knowledgeable about, which is keeping the Sabbath. Where it gets kind of weird is the fact that, like, now fast forward 2,000 years, nobody keeps the Sabbath, hardly, or it's few far in between, rather. I wouldn't say nobody keeps it. Like, there's probably several kind of sects that still believe in Sabbath keeping besides the Jews. There are some churches out there that believe this way. But the I kind of lost train of my thought there. But anyway, the point of the whole thing is it wasn't sort of reiterated, this Sabbath keeping, in the New Testament, I think, because it was such common knowledge and it was just not worth Paul's time, or even John or James's, Matthew. It just wasn't worth their time to discuss it, since it was already such a common knowledge for that culture and time period. So, but I noticed too that this is the only commandment where God says, let it be remembered. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Like, I think because he knew that there was going to come a day when people would absolutely forget the Sabbath day. They would forget everything, and it would just be, a free-for-all. So I think he sort of, God really wanted to drum it in. Don't forget, I'm giving you this commandment. Remember to keep it holy. Don't forget this. And he said, and he says it through the prophets, like, many times throughout the Old Testament. So, and Jesus came when he said what he said about not abolishing the law, just kind of confirmed that, because it's like, well, what do you really do with that? If you say, when you read that scripture, it's like, well, he came not to abolish the law or the prophets, and heaven and earth won't pass away before one jot or tittle of the law pass. So it was like he came to fulfill it. So the word fulfill means that it's done. It's completely, and yet we're still here. So heaven and earth have not passed away yet. So therefore the law hasn't been completely fulfilled yet either, because we're still here talking about it. So once it goes away, we'll be gone. We won't be here in this life, in this earth, talking about or even arguing about it, or it just. So that's kind of the premise. But the thing about it is, and here's another interesting piece. The next question on this document says, what does the third commandment, or what does the third commandment command? Okay? And the answer to this question is, the third commandment commands us to sanctify Sunday as the Lord's Day. No scriptural reference. So, at the Council of Laodicea in 336 AD, they decide that the Sabbath keeping is actually the third commandment instead of the fourth commandment, and that it's Sunday, without any scriptural reference whatsoever. Now, this is like right at the beginning of Roman Catholicism. So they're in their heyday at this point. But the thing about it was, there were some arguments being had at that time at the council of when they drafted up the Nicene Creed about this subject, and I don't think that they had. Well, they did establish it in the Nicene Creed that said, because that had happened like some 11 years prior to this document. So in 325 AD, in the Nicene Creed, it does state that that Sunday is that we shall observe church, the risen Christ on Sunday. So so this was happening before the Catholic Church was established. So even though this is, insanely heretical, it's you can't blame it all on, you can't put it all on the Catholic Church, because this was going on before these guys showed up on the scene. It's just that they were the ones that sort of normalized it and made a sort of decree that this is okay. This is what God is doing with us now. We are in a New Testament period, and this is kind of the old is done away with, and we are now changing the commandments, and that's just fine because God has given us that divine right. But history is really unclear whether or not, like, where exactly this took place. So, like, I've read church history from, like, the first century, like, from, first 400 years of after Christ's death. And history doesn't really make it clear. But, when you dig in the history books, from 0 to 100 AD and 100 to 200 AD, somewhere in that timeline, you have a lot of persecution from the Romans on the Jews. So lots of Jewish and Christian persecution happening. And the thing about it was the Jews and the Gentile Christians didn't like one another. So there was some contention there between them. And they wanted to differentiate themselves from the Jews because the Jews kept the Sabbath. Like I said, again, we're in a culture in this time period where all of the sort of the religious world, the religious world that worships the Hebrew God, are keeping Saturday Sabbath, Friday evening to Saturday evening. So there was contention between these two groups because the Jews were kind of still stuck in their ways during that time, and they said, well, let's just or these are unclean people. These Gentiles are unclean people. They're unclean. They don't eat with them, don't dine with them, don't invite them into your house, kind of thing. So, yet there was persecution from the Romans on both fronts, because the Romans didn't distinguish Gentile Christians from Jews. They just looked at them as just one whole group of fanatics. So they didn't discriminate there. So again, and just about, and Roman paganism was rampant with sun god worship, ancient Phoenician god, Mithras, sun god worship was happening on Sunday. So it was a really popular time for Roman paganism to venerate the to honor the sun god, the venerable day of the sun, and all of that. So that was happening. So they wanted to kind of blend in, I think, to escape some of the persecution. So somewhere within that time frame, they decided we're just going to do this we're just going to do our worship on Sunday to try to escape some of the persecution, because it was easy to spot Jews in the synagogue, because they was always on Saturday morning they were out preaching in the synagogues. So it was very easy to find a group of Jews or Christians. They would just go to the synagogues, and that's it. So they would have a heyday there. So I think there was I think a lot of that just simply what they just decided that they were gonna change it to Sunday to blend in. Again, history is unclear about that, so I'm just speculating. But that's my theory. That's my theory, because you go from Jesus's followers, Sabbath keeping a bunch of people, to the Council of Laodicea in 336. So you get 300 years later, you got people talking about, oh, we're just going to change it to Sunday. So it only took a few hundred years for the devil to get into this. But and Constantine, it depends on the historian, but Constantine, some will say, was a Christian, that he was a converted Christian. Some will say that he wasn't a converted Christian. He was just a pagan who was faking it. The thing about it is, the reality is that he had all of the reason in the world, all of the incentive in the world to try and unify Christianity, because there was a lot of them. They couldn't persecute him. They couldn't persecute them all. So there was, I think he came to the realization that there was no getting rid of Christianity. It wasn't going to just kind of die down or go away. So I think he just tried to. So he basically, in a way, legalized it. Well, I think it was legal a little bit before he came on the scene, but he organized it. He organized it by what they did in the Nicene Creed, which was basically, kind of outline the core beliefs of. This is the outline of the core beliefs of Christianity. So, which maybe I'll do a podcast on reading the Nicene Creed and kind of go over some of that nonsense, because. And when you go back and read some of this history, it makes perfect sense how we end up at the confusion that we're at. Because if this is 300 years after Jesus' death, only 300 years, and already you've got all of this mass confusion on doctrinal matters on the scene. So it didn't take long. It didn't take long for all of this to start taking place. So, and it took another, 1,400 years before people started thinking, you know what? I think this Catholic thing isn't biblical. And so his church history is really a big old mess when you start to read into it. But yeah, it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating how all of this kind of just happened. And I haven't even gotten really into the scriptures yet, but it's just a fascinating topic of discussion anyway. Just reading like how things change, how much things changed from, the ministry of Jesus Christ coming on the scene, just kind of dumbfounding everyone, confounding everyone, because it was just what he was preaching was just, that's not what they were expecting. And fast forward to that, 2,000 years, it's just like, whoa. But it only took 300 years for confusion to begin for the church to start to descend into confusion. So we're changing the Sabbath. We're making a whole lot of other assumptions about the divinity of God, with the Trinity, which is that's another interesting point of discussion, but that's not what I'm talking about today, so I won't get into that. But how we come to the Trinity is also another just fascinating piece of history there. But anyway, so I just kind of wanted to lay that groundwork that this is how we arrive at no Sabbath keeping. Like no Friday evening to Saturday evening Sabbath keeping. This is how we arrived at that. So there was some persecution in the church first couple of 100 years. By the time 336 AD happens, you have the universal church, which is the Roman Catholic Church, changing the Sabbath day from Saturday to Sunday. So, And the thing about it is even after the Protestant Reformation, you have a whole bunch of people breaking away from the Catholic Church, but still holding on to a lot of the basic ideology, all of these sort of theological theories that was birthed, sort of brought in, legalized by the Catholic Church, still holding on to some of those things. And that's how we arrive at, well, Sabbath day is Sunday, just because we said it is. And which the thing about it is, you can worship God on Sunday, you can worship him on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but the Sabbath day is the only day where God said, I have made this holy and sanctified you because you keep it. And then he lists a whole bunch of things in Exodus where he says, if you do this, this is what I will do for you. It wasn't just Exodus, it was Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and a few other books where he says, so Isaiah speaks about it several times, and then Leviticus and Deuteronomy, where he says, I will do this for you if you keep it, and I will do this to you if you don't keep it. And there's many examples of like the curse that falls on the children of Israel for not keeping the Sabbath, as well as, committing idolatry and doing a great many other sins there, which is also another great topic that I need to break into as well. Is that everybody just automatically lumps an Israelite, labels them as Jewish, and that is that couldn't be farther from the truth at all. Because there's two tribes that survived sort of the Israelite separation, or the separation of states in Israel, because there was originally 12 tribes in Israel. Judah and Benjamin were the ones that remained keeping the Sabbath, and the rest of Israel was taken on in Babylonian. I'll have to read back on that. I think it was prior to the Babylonian captivity. They were taken captive by someone else. I have to read up on that, but reread my history on that one, because I want to tell you the truth. I don't want to make a mistake on this. But so 10 tribes of Israel got scattered because they got away from Sabbath keeping. They got away from command keeping in general. It just became wicked. So God caused curse to fall on their land, and they were taken up in captivity. And then so Judah and Benjamin stayed true to God, but then they eventually also descend in the same sort of wickedness, and then they were taken captive by Babylon came and made them captive. But God said, I'll not utterly destroy Benjamin and Judah because of the obedience of their fathers. So basically, they were spared utter destruction, and they weren't scattered because they had some time where they did obey God, and God brought them back. But even to this day, a lot of the Jews will not accept Jesus. Some of the Jews have, but a lot of the Jews will not accept Jesus as the Messiah, because they hold to that sort of the ideal that the Messiah was going to come in glory. The Messiah was going to come and set them free from Roman persecution. He was going to come with an army. So they had a lot of misconceptions about who the Messiah was going to be and what he was going to look like, talk like, and do. They did not expect God to take up his residence in a humble Nazarite. They didn't see that coming at all. So that kind of busted all of their theories. So, but I I love having these discussions, and I can literally talk about it all day. But I think I've got an hour, maybe a little bit more than an hour already, and so I will get into like the scriptures maybe on the next one that I do like this, because I want to keep this kind of casual and minimal editing on here as well. So if you like this video, if you like this kind of content, thumbs up it, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll do another one of these